Of all the major policy initiatives of the current administration, we have seen no significant departure from those of the previous administration. I put to this House that we are not talking about a return to a state of affairs. Those state of affairs exist already. Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the singular honor of addressing this august chamber. And thank you to all those members who had the patience to wait this long and listen to my speech. If someone had been absent from America for the last 3 years, say had decided to live in the wild in a cabin with no access to social media or to television, my first reaction might be to be very jealous of them. Imagine the bliss of living a simpler existence without the stress of news cycles and the endless politics. But you would not be surprised if this blessed individual was still under the impression that Donald J. Trump was still the president of the United States. While Joe Biden has spent much of his alleged presidency sleeping, dodging reporters, generally bringing embarrassment upon the greatest office in the free world, Trump has been doing what he does best and soaking up media attention. I'm sure he has reveled in the desperate and cynical attempts to prevent him running in 2024. I'm sure he's been delighted at the endless speculation about his campaign and the gaggle of reporters who cling to his every word. But most of all, honourable members, I'm sure it would bring him great pleasure to learn that an institution as esteemed as this House has devoted one of its famous debates just to him. Yet there are other, more important reasons why Trump remains the most influential politician in America today. As my esteemed colleague pointed out earlier on, the issues which Trump so clearly identified in 2016, disenfranchisement from a broken economic model, concerns about a rapidly changing culture, and a prescient identification of the threats posed from abroad, still dominate American and indeed world politics today. And the remedies that Trump found and proposed to them, be that innovative diplomatic work, greater support for the American economy, or vital work to strengthen the armed forces which keep us all safe. These are the policies which the present administration has adopted and, in many cases, pursued more vigorously. And let me say, honourable members, let me make it clear to you that you are not being asked to vote on the man Donald Trump tonight. Members of the proposition have spoken at length and in great detail about many of Trump's supposed character flaws. Now, I'm sure that we all have many different opinions of him. I'm sure some in this House greatly support him. I'm sure perhaps many others do not. Let me say perhaps that if I were looking for an American leader, a powerful, controversial, perhaps even, some may say, demagogic American leader, I would look no further than the librarian of Corpus Christi College. But tonight, we are being asked to vote on a country and on a set of policies. Mr. Sanders, you said before that this was a serious matter, and let me say that I could not agree more. What happens in America in the next 4 years matters for the American people. It matters for the West, and it matters for the world. We have already agreed from my esteemed colleagues about Trump's America. And I completely agree with JL that Trump's America is so much more than a man. Trump's America is a phenomenon. It is a set of deep-rooted problems. Trump is a symptom of deep problems. And I agree with many of the things which Sebastian said, and I shall elucidate further. No, thank you. But as the final speaker tonight, I'm going to focus my argument on the present and on the future. Of all the major policy initiatives of the current administration, we have seen no significant departure from those of the previous administration. I put to this House that we are not talking about a return to a state of affairs. Those state of affairs exist already. My second argument will be that these key underlying policies are beneficial. They are good for the American people. And so, rather than throwing them, we should look forward to their continuation, whichever candidate wins at the next presidential election. I shall first of all talk about domestic policy. In 2016, Donald Trump, as JL said, spoke to a group of voters who felt left behind by a failing economic model. To the swing states, Trump spoke a message of hope. After 30 years of neglect by successive administrations of both sides, there was finally a candidate who spoke of prosperity and who spoke of change. Now, I, as a classicist, like the opening speaker of the proposition, admit to being hopelessly ignorant about the fine details of economic policy. But I'm a firm believer in the doctrine of that great Bible of political knowledge, the BBC series Yes, Minister. They're the only people who know less about economics than the students of classics are economists themselves. And that doctrine is given weight by the fact that on all of the great decisions over the last 30 years, the consensus of the economic experts has been miserably and predictably wrong every single time. They failed to recognize the crash. They were wrong about austerity. And to the detriment of all of those of us with heating bills to pay, they failed to recognize the terrible signs of rising inflation. Trump broke this consensus in a shatteringly effective way. For the first time, the White House stood up to the problem of unfair trade and its disastrous effects on the American industrial base. The threat of the imposition of tariffs, particularly on China, guaranteed a fairer deal for the American worker. The tax cuts delivered by the Trump administration delivered a record low unemployment, a soaring stock exchange, and sustained economic growth. If there is anything this House has to fear, it has been the economic mismanagement of the Biden administration. And the results have been clear. Think, for example, about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. For those who accuse Mr. Trump of playing fast and loose with the truth, I put it to you that this piece of legislation competes only with the Tony Blair Institute for Peace in the Middle East, in the irony of its naming. The inevitable results of Biden's policy has, of course, been soaring inflation. To sum up, President Biden won those crucial swing states by offering to continue Trump's economic legacy. It is no surprise that he is failing electorally after he deserted it. Now, I won't keep you for much longer, but let me finish with a return to a topic perhaps of more resonance for those of us in this room, that of foreign affairs. And given that the dear ex-chair of the Consultative Committee, Exeter College, has now sadly returned to the land of the free, I feel it's my responsibility to talk about the evils of the Chinese Communist Party. Today, we are all too aware of the dangers of pretending that there can be some kind of golden age in Sino-Western relations. The CCP, from the genocide in Xinjiang, to the lab leak which forced the world into hibernation, to the menacing and provocative encroachment towards Taiwan and the South China Sea, the world has finally woken up to the dangers. And I ask you, who was responsible for shaking the world out of its slumber? The answer is former President Trump. No, thank you. His tough stance and rhetoric on China gave the US the opportunity to constrain this growing threat. A tougher stance on trade and a build-up of the US military has given us the tools to ensure that peace and democracy continue to thrive into the 21st century. The second and final area is the Middle East. This is an extremely complicated area, and I'm sure it's one that everybody in this room rightly feels deeply, strongly about. But I say that the one thing that matters more than anything else is a just and lasting peace. And the one policy, the one suggestion over the last 50 years among so much bloodshed, I put to you, that has given us any prospect of peace whatsoever has been the Abraham Accords. Who started those? Who set the ball rolling? Trump. Who continued them? Who has worked to expand the deal, to continue to work for peace? Biden. Yet another example of a successful policy by Trump and the current administration continuing. So, to sum up, I say, whether we're speaking about foreign or domestic policy, whether we're speaking about China, Iran, Israel, Iraq, whether we're speaking about the economy, whether we're speaking about immigration, whether we're speaking about the quickest and most successful vaccine rollout in the world, whatever we're speaking about, I say to you that Trump's America is here, it is here to stay, and it is working. And so I urge you all finally to vote for the opposition tonight. Thank you very much.